Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Go Big or Go Home dual episode today. We have normally done a separate basketball and a separate football show. Due to the holiday and due to an unfortunate event yesterday, we're going to do one show today, and I'm going to welcome in Mr. Fireball, the youngster Kevin Cunningham, a.k.a. Kid Cunny on Twitter. And you can let the listeners know why I just called you Fireball.
Yeah, that's definitely my new nickname for at least a while. Because if there's anything that you listeners do listening to this show, if you want to stop listening to the show in a couple minutes once I get done with the sentence, feel free. That's fine. Obviously, we hope that you clicked on this link to hear about Big Ten basketball, Big Ten football, obviously what's coming around the corner, college football playoff, But again, if all you do is you don't even have to follow me on Twitter. Just check my profile out on Twitter. And this is not some endorsement for my Twitter, but at KIDCUNI, Kid Cunning. That's all one word, KIDCUNI. Just go to my Twitter profile. Check out the latest, it might be the latest tweet, but the latest photo on my Twitter profile. Again, at KIDCUNI. Just check out my last photo that's on there. And it's a photo of my car that's in flames. It's actually my latest tweet. I don't know if I'll tweet again for a few days, whatever. But my car is sitting there in flames. And it's just literally every time I see the photo, I laugh. And that's my car. It's in flames. But every time I see the photo, I laugh because it's just something out of a movie. You said it before the show, Troy, that it's like something out of a movie that you would see. And I've had 3 or 4 people tell me that, my God, it's like you're looking at a freaking movie by just looking at this photo. It's a car just in flames. It's unbelievable. That's what happened to my car yesterday. I was in a car accident. I was going straight in a 45. There was this long intersection. This guy coming from my left, going to my right. He had a stop sign. I don't know if he stopped appropriately because the intersection is that long for a stop sign, but he said afterwards that he saw a car go by. He thought he was good to go. By the time he went through the intersection and I was still going straight, there was nothing we could do, really. I saw him out of the corner of my eye. At the last second, I slammed on my brakes. But it was too late at that point. His car hits the front left of my car, the very front left tip. My bumper falls off. But that was basically it. I mean, the last 95% of my car was basically fine up until after the accident. Right after the accident, airbag probably saves my life. But I hit the airbag with my face. I'm doing just fine. Realistically, I get out of the car immediately. I realize my phone's still in the car, and I'm standing right there. I'm perfectly able to grab it, so I grab the phone from the car, and I notice as I'm grabbing my phone that there's a small flame randomly in the middle of the car, basically on top of the armrest. And so I have no idea what is flaming. I'm not going to sit there and diagnose it and figure out what is flaming, how it's flaming, why it's flaming. But
I'm glad you didn't stay in the car, youngster, and curious. I'm very glad.
No, I wasn't going to do any diagnostic testing there. But so I thought to myself, like, well, that potentially could suck really bad. So I grab my phone, get the heck out of there, meet up with the guy, and the flame just keeps getting bigger. I mean, we just keep watching my car as it's sitting there in the middle of the road. And his car is perfectly fine, of course. He had a small truck, a very small truck, but his truck perfectly fine. We're sitting there watching my car as the flame's getting bigger and bigger, and eventually, basically the whole car just goes up in flames. The photo I have on Twitter, again, at KIDCUNI on Twitter. That's follow me, don't follow me, I don't care. Just look at the photo on Twitter. It got a little worse than that. From the photo I had, because the flame just started going out of the sides of the car. This, you can see the entire top of the car is just in a huge flame with a bunch of smoke. And you can also see the door is opened. The driver's side door that I got out of is also in flames. So it's very, again, if there's anything you take from this show, follow me on Twitter. Don't follow me on Twitter. I don't care. Just look at my Twitter, the latest photo I have on my Twitter, because it's just something you'll laugh at because it looks like it's something out of a movie. That was my day yesterday. I mean, I didn't do much other than work in the morning, my early morning stock job, got out of work, and picked up some Arby's to go home, and I never got to eat those Arby's because they turned into a flame. That was my afternoon.
I didn't want to laugh. I really didn't, but you made me laugh because the way you said that, like your car just burned down, but you're worried that you couldn't eat your Arby's.
Well, I didn't think about the Arby's until last night. I was taking a shower. I was like, wait a minute, I had Arby's. Like I was thinking, like, all right, I get out of work, I start driving home. No, I stopped for Arby's first. And I realized I had it in my passenger seat, just chilling there, waiting for me to get home so I can eat it. And yeah, I just remembered, like, oh my God, I picked up Arby's.
I wonder if you could claim that on your insurance, because the insurance is going to pay for the inside. If you had personal belongings inside, I would imagine. I wonder if you can claim the Arby's. You paid for
the extra $5.
It was your property. You were going to ingest this. I would think about claiming that, youngster. See if they'll reimburse you the Arby's. I had to laugh because your car goes up in flames, and you're sitting here going, and I had my Arby's that I didn't get to eat. You crack me up sometime. I'm sure it would have been. But in all seriousness, we can laugh today. I'll tell the listeners, Kevin texted me. We were supposed to record a show yesterday, and we, of course, did not. But it was no laughing matter yesterday, Kevin. I text you, glad you're okay. It could have been a lot worse, just a car. Now, today we can laugh. So I am very glad that you were safe, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart. When you said that you were in a car accident and your car was on fire, I was like, holy crap, I hope he's okay. So I'm glad you're okay. I joked with you before, glad your throat's okay, because you and I are going to talk up a storm today doing a dual show, basketball, football, and oh my, Kevin, the college football playoff, not only one wrench, two wrenches, because now mighty Alabama has lost, and the rankings are all shuffled up, and there's a lot of scenarios that could end up being the college football playoff as we know it, and because these teams at the top are playing each other. So I'm going to turn it over to you like we always do for the football segment, let you go through the playoff rankings. I know you're going to go through all the relevant playoff teams and mention those that are still possibly alive for this 14 playoff. It's amazing at this point that there's so many scenarios for those final four teams.
Yeah. Usually you'll have maybe a spot or two up for grabs. Obviously every team, usually can lose in that Final Four in the last weekend. It's conference championships. Maybe you'll have two teams in there from the same conference, so one spot's obviously going to be open. Maybe you have an upset. Maybe, two spots will open up. But so you're looking at, realistically 5, 6, 7 teams maybe that have a real shot at getting into the college football playoff. This year, I'll go through the rankings. Number 1, Clemson. Number 2, Auburn. So you got ACC in there, SEC in there. Number 3, Oklahoma. That's Big 12. Number 4, Wisconsin finally moves into the top 4 for the first time all year. They're 12-0. They're the only undefeated team, I believe, outside of UCF, if I'm not mistaken. As I scroll through the top 25, I would assume that another undefeated team would be in there somewhere. If another team was undefeated, I'm pretty sure it's just Wisconsin and UCF. But so, again, number 1, Clemson. You got the ACC. Number 2, Auburn, SEC. Number 3, Big 12, Oklahoma. Number 4, Big 10, Wisconsin. If Clemson wins the ACC championship game, they're in. If Auburn wins the SEC championship game, they're in. If Oklahoma wins the Big 12 championship game, they're in. And believe it or not, Wisconsin at number 4, ahead of number 5, Alabama. That was going to be interesting to see if Wisconsin would have to maybe impress the committee and beat Ohio State by, say, 2 touchdowns, something convincing, while Alabama sits at home, and then you could vault Wisconsin over Alabama. But right now, Wisconsin is number 4, Bama's number 5. if Wisconsin beats number 8 Ohio State now, as it is, that's an impressive win. Again, Alabama's not in the SEC championship game. That's between number 2 Auburn, who just beat them by a couple touchdowns, and number 6 Georgia. So again, Bama's 5, Georgia's 6. Again, if Clemson, Auburn, Oklahoma, Wisconsin win their conference championship games, there's no reason why Bama or anyone else would jump those 4 teams, and especially Wisconsin, not because this is just a Big Ten show, but they're the number 4 team. There's no reason why those 4 would, be mixed up and you'd get one flying out of there. Maybe you can have an impressive Wisconsin victory, and Oklahoma looks like crap beating TCU in triple overtime, and so Wisconsin will vault up to number 3. Whatever happens in that top 4 obviously can, if all 4 do go on to win. But if those 4 win, they should be in, just like any other year, I suppose. But Bama, number 5, sitting at home. Number 6, Georgia, again, they play Auburn. So if Georgia pulls that upset, so to say, then you would likely see Auburn out because they would be 10-3 overall. The committee's not going to put a 10-3 team who just lost their conference championship in. Number 6, Georgia, would vault in. They're 11-1. They'd go to 12-1. They'd be in for sure. Miami plays Clemson. Miami's at number 7. Clemson's 11-1. They're the number 1 team. But if they have 2 losses and they lose to Miami the last week of the season, it's going to be pretty easy to move Miami ahead of Clemson, because all the committee has done this year, which maybe you can chime in with your point here, Troy, because I know you've got one, that if a team in the top 10 loses to another team in the top 10, typically you'll see Oklahoma right ahead of Ohio State, because Oklahoma beat Ohio State earlier in the year. You'll see, for example, Ohio State directly ahead of Penn State. Ohio State beat Penn State. Every single college football playoff ranking to this point, Ohio State's been 1 spot ahead of Penn State. Basically, if you beat someone, then you're going to be ahead of them, unless it's something ridiculous. An unranked team beats number 3. But like I said, if it's 2 top 10 teams, you're going to see a little repositioning where that team that just won is probably 1 spot ahead of the team that just lost. So if Miami beats Clemson, I expect Miami to be in at 11-1, and I expect Clemson to fall out at 11-2. That's how I see it. I don't think Clemson can lose and be in unless there's a ton of upsets to Auburn, to Oklahoma, to Wisconsin. A lot would have to happen for Clemson to lose and be in.
Yeah, this is a good time for me to jump in. Like you said, I do have a point on this, and I text you Saturday night. I told you before the show. The text was, it'll be interesting to see what the committee does and if there basically is human bias here in this poll. And now today or yesterday when the poll came out, if I could, I would stand on a mountain and I would applaud this committee, Kevin. The one thing that I've always asked for and one thing that I like is consistency. They didn't play mighty Alabama power and position them to be in the playoff. The way that things have been happening when top teams lose, like you said, they drop anywhere from 5 to 6 spots, and the team that beat them, if they're ranked high. If you look at the Iowa win over Ohio State, they're not going to vault Iowa up ahead of Ohio State.
Right.
But if it's a top 10, top 12, top 13, that team then moves ahead of the team that lost. And I said to you in that text, I could very well see the committee being sentimental and dropping Alabama to 4. And I told you if that happened, you might need earplugs today, because I would have went on a huge rant about the inconsistency and the favoritism that would have been shown. For this recent poll, Kevin, literally I would stand on a mountain and applaud this committee. I think they've got it right. Now, I will still stand by the fact the Wisconsin Badgers, who are my home state team, the team I cheer for, I still don't think they're the 4th best team in the country. But as a fan, I am ecstatic. But they got to play Ohio State. I don't think they beat Ohio State. But it's nice to see that the committee finally moved them up there. They had no choice at this point. But as a fan, I'm going to be cheering my guts out, Kevin. I know you and I may not talk at all during that game. Maybe not. Some good friendly jabbing going around. But as a fan, I'm going to be cheering for my red and white. But as a host of a show, I got to be real. When you look at the check marks, Ohio State, outside of defensively, Ohio State owns the check marks. But I want to go back, and you had mentioned the things that could happen here in this poll. You look, and very easy if the top four wins. So I've already said now Wisconsin loses. So we'll start at the bottom of this, Youngster, and we'll kind of give our 2 cents worth. And I think you agree with me that Ohio State is a better team. They can beat Wisconsin. Wisconsin's a good team, good defensively. If they can start running the ball with Taylor, keep the ball out of Hornibrook's hands, and not make him win the game, does Wisconsin have a chance? Of course. They're a good team. But in all reality, I think you agree with me, Ohio State should win this game, correct?
That's correct.
All right, so Wisconsin out. Now we got Ohio State, 2 losses. Then we've got 3, Oklahoma, against TCU. I think Oklahoma's going to win this game because TCU is streaky. But here's the thing, Kevin. If TCU's offense gets on track against what I think is a pretty average Oklahoma defense this year, what'd they just give up to West Virginia? Like 38 points in their win. They had to score 50 to win, 31, something like that. I don't like this Oklahoma defense. And if TCU's offense gets on that streak, bye-bye Oklahoma. So here's what I'm going to say. I think Oklahoma can win this game, but I'm going to, for the sake of this show, bam, TCU beats Oklahoma because I don't think their defense is very good. Before I go to number 2, I want to get your thoughts on that TCU-Oklahoma game and what you think of Oklahoma's defense. I don't think it's good.
So you think TCU wins? Is that right?
No, the Oklahoma defense. The TCU-Oklahoma game.
Yeah, do you think TCU beats Oklahoma?
I'll say it for the sake of the show. I think Oklahoma's going to win right now because I think offensively this could be a shootout and Oklahoma can score. I may not agree with the things that Baker Mayfield does, but, man, he can sure play quarterback. He sure can play quarterback. There's no doubt about that. But defensively, if this gets in a shootout, I think that Oklahoma's going to win this game.
Yeah, I'll say this. Very quick tangent. I think Baker Mayfield's a fantastic collegiate quarterback, maybe the best out there. But if I'm an NFL team, I don't take Baker Mayfield. Literally. The same thing I said about Johnny Manziel, and Mayfield is a mini Manziel, but he's of the same kind. He's just a mini Manziel, I like to say, because he's not dangerous with what he does. He's not going to, be an alcoholic and ruin his life. Not saying that Manziel's life is over, but I don't think Mayfield's going to ruin his life because of how immature he is, but he is immature in grabbing his crotch and caring that much about what Kansas says to him a week ago. He's just an immature child. You would not see Tom Brady coming out of Michigan grabbing his crotch at some garbage opponent in Michigan.
Exactly,
you wouldn't see Russell
Kevin.
Wilson do that.
I'll chime in here. He doesn't have it between the ears. Have it between the ears. It's a very good point you bring up. I just wanted to throw that out there. I'll let you finish.
Yeah, I just consider him a child. I mean, he is not mature enough to lead a NFL franchise and put in the work. I don't care if he's a film junkie, so to say, at Oklahoma or not. I highly doubt he is because I think he's an immature kid. Same as I thought with Manziel. I didn't think Tim Tebow was going to work in the NFL, but it wasn't because between the ears. It was just athletically. And there are guys like Manziel where talent-wise, I didn't think he had the arm strength really to make it in the NFL to begin with. But I thought he, for sure could play in the NFL as a backup. But what's above the neck? No. I wouldn't have drafted Johnny Manziel.
This go in many directions, Youngster. Now, you brought up the Manziel thing because I want to throw this out there. I know it's been a couple years ago, but I remember I used to do another show, the Red Light Sports Ramble. You came on, we talked about Johnny Manziel, and I remember you and I talking about this, and my other co-host, Evan Witalison, thought Manziel could be successful in the NFL. You and I said no. And this is the reason I said no. He could run around because he was more athletic and chuck the ball up because he had great receivers. That's what he had when he was in college. He had an athletic ability to run around, not get sacked, and then his receivers were men among boys against average cornerback play in college football. That's why Manziel put up mega yards. And it equated to nothing in the NFL. You and I were on that page. It is what it is. I didn't mean to go off on that tangent, but you brought it up, that you can tell sometimes, and you can't just look at wins and losses and stats when you're looking at a college quarterback, because you have to look, how do they play the game? How do they play the game? Mayfield can play the college game. But when you look at his immaturity, he has now got to step into a room with 51 other guys and expect to lead them. I don't think you're going to lead guys by grabbing your crotch as your touchdown dance. That's what I'm calling that. That's his touchdown dance, Kevin. It's grabbing his crotch. I'm sure a lot of people are not going to go for that. You've got to have it between the ears in the NFL. Can Mayfield make it skill set-wise in the NFL? I think he could. But I really don't think his future in the NFL is going to last very long. That's my quick thought there.
Wouldn't surprise me at all if he gets demoted or never really becomes a true starter for a team and his immaturity takes over and he gets kicked out of the league, basically. Not necessarily by Roger Goodell saying, hey, you can't play football anymore, but basically that this guy's a problem child and his talent is there, but he's not some transformative Cam Newton, unbelievable athletic freak. He's a 6'1" quarterback who can run around. He's like Johnny Manziel. He's not fast like Russell Wilson. I think Johnny Manziel is agile. I think Russell Wilson's fast. I think Marcus Mariota's fast. I think Cam Newton's agile. I don't think he's fast, but he's 6'6", 250. So it takes a load to bring him down. Baker Mayfield's 6'1". I mean, I'm sure he's 215 pounds. He's nothing. I mean, he's maybe a little bigger than Manziel. He's not a scrawny kid, but he's not built like a frickin' Cam Newton Big Ben. I mean, he's not going to run around in defenses. Russell Wilson's thick. He's not light. So he can run around, take a hit here and there, and he'll get injured basically every single year. And you'll see Russell Wilson either miss a few games or not be 100% for a majority of an NFL season. But he can run around, improvise. But what makes Russell Wilson that exception of being 5'11" and making it work is that he's got a cannon for an arm. He's extremely accurate, and he's the most mature kid coming out of college that you could possibly ask for. So that compared to Baker Mayfield, it's night and day, and I hate when I hear the comparison of Mayfield to, oh, yeah, he's got the talent and skill level of guys like, Russell Wilson and Johnny Manziel. So he can make it work. He's not going to throw his life away like Manziel. I think he can be the next Russell Wilson, running around, improvising, making his own plays. He's got the arm strength to do it. I don't think so at all. Talent-wise, I think he could maybe make it work as a starter, maybe a B-level starter in the NFL. That's what I'd consider him. But then you go from the neck up, and maturity, he does not have it whatsoever. I wouldn't waste a pick on him.
Hey, youngster, I want to comment on something you said. That's why I love doing shows with you. You said he can run around, improvise, and make up his own plays. That may work in college. It worked for Johnny Manziel. But I want to tell you something. How many quarterbacks in the NFL can run around and make up plays? There's one that comes to mind, and that's Aaron Rodgers. But even when Aaron Rodgers scrambles, he scrambles with a purpose. He's surveying the field. He knows where his routes are. His receivers understand what happens when the pocket breaks down. There is more that goes into that than a quarterback making up a play. It's something that is practiced. It is something that you build through continuity, through trust. That's why Aaron Rodgers is so good at it, but it's not just Aaron Rodgers. Everybody gives Rodgers the credit. and this is one thing, I'll sit here and I will agree. Aaron Rodgers, great quarterback. But everybody says, oh, look how he improvised. Yes, he does. Why don't the receivers get credit, Kevin? They know, and they've mentioned this on TV. When the pocket breaks down for Aaron Rodgers, those receivers cut their routes and they go to an open space. That's what they do because Aaron Rodgers has vision of the whole field, and that's how he improvises. He doesn't make up a play. Everybody's got to be on the same page. I don't see that with Mayfield. Could he scramble and extend the pocket, extend the play? Sure. He doesn't have anywhere near the skill set of Aaron Rodgers. No way, no how. And so I always laugh when people say this quarterback is great at improvising. Well, you got to look at the whole page. Why are they great at improvising? Because their receivers are helping them. The quarterbacks that run outside of the pocket, Kevin, and are not very good at it, that get flustered, the receivers are running the same route, the route that was called in the huddle, out of the pocket. Or if it was to move the pocket, roll out to the left, roll to the right, the route is set up for a specific time. When you break that pocket, if you're running the same route, everything is off key. And those quarterbacks then try to force the ball, and that's how you see interception. So I just had to comment on that because it just made my brain click. Like, I've heard that before. People saying, oh, he can improvise. Yeah, well, it's not just the quarterback. Wanted to throw that out there.
Very true. And still, to me, there's only two quarterbacks that do it. And Rodgers is unbelievable from the pocket. He does most of his work, I think, anyway, from the pocket. But, yeah, he can scramble, improvise a little bit, and give credit to the receivers. But unless you have an arm talent like Rodgers and you're mature enough to care about the game as much as Rodgers and be a face of the franchise like Rodgers, and you have that arm talent, which is, talent-wise, Rodgers is arguably the best quarterback ever. I think Brady is, just in general, but Rodgers, throw him in New England, his system, with Belichick, I'm sure Rodgers would have the same success. I don't think there's much of a difference there at all. But in general, outside of Rodgers doing that, you got Russell Wilson, who's very fast. He's thick. He can evade defenders and not necessarily go down instantly, like I think Mayfield will in the NFL. As soon as a defensive lineman touches him, I think he's going to go down. I don't think Russell Wilson, as soon as you touch him, he goes down. I think he's very smart, which is the complete difference maker. He's smart in the way he improvises, and Pete Carroll on that offense know that he improvises and gets out of the pocket on almost half the times he frickin' drops back out of the pocket. I mean, that's Russell Wilson. That's Seattle game. I mean, ask anyone who studies film in the NFL, and they'll tell you it's unbelievable what Seattle does, what Russell Wilson does, because of how much is just improvisation. Because partly of how bad the offensive line is in Seattle every year, that he has to do it, but he is damn good at it, and there's nobody like Russell Wilson. You've got 5'11", 6-foot Drew Brees, who's, incredibly accurate, huge arm, maybe not a huge arm now, but when he was in his prime. But outside of Drew Brees being 6 foot and just, growing into a dynamite pocket passer, you don't have luck with those small quarterbacks, and especially the ones that do most of their damage by improvisation in college. It does not translate unless you're Russell Wilson. And Aaron Rodgers, again, don't let him improvise. That's fine. He'll kill you from the pocket. He doesn't have to improvise. He's just really good at it. It's not his bread and butter. Mayfield, to me, his bread and butter is getting out of the pocket and improvising, making defenders miss because he's quicker, faster than collegiate defenders. In the NFL, you can't do that on a consistent basis. Marcus Mariota scrambles for Tennessee. He's probably the fastest quarterback in the NFL, but he doesn't do it consistently. He doesn't try to improvise and get out of the pocket and beat defenders with his speed on every play. He just doesn't, because he knows he can't. He can't take those hits constantly, like Russell Wilson almost does. And again, that's why you see him nicked up every single year by the end of the year. But finally, to get away from Mayfield to the NFL, finally, Oklahoma TCU. I'm with you, Troy. I think this is a shootout. Oklahoma, outside of the first 3 games, I'll read you how many points Oklahoma's defense has given up. 41 to Baylor, 38 to Iowa State, 24 to Texas, lowly Texas. They still give up 24 points. They play Kansas State the next week, give up 35. Play Texas Tech, 27. Oklahoma State, 52. TCU, they beat them earlier in the year, 38 to 20. Then they play Kansas. They give up 3 points because it's Kansas. And then last week, like you mentioned, Troy, West Virginia, they gave up 31 points. So you're giving up 31, 52, 35, 38, 41. This Oklahoma defense isn't even average, in my opinion. Since the first 3 weeks of the year, they've been bad. So I think TCU can win the game. I wouldn't, put our monopoly money on it, as you like to say, Troy, but I would pick Oklahoma and their offense to beat TCU's and their offense, because typically Oklahoma has been able to outscore teams all except Iowa State when they lost 38-31. That's the only blip on Oklahoma's radar. So I would say Oklahoma would beat TCU as well.
Yeah, Oklahoma's used to the shootout games, and TCU is as well. But like I said, the reason I give the edge to Oklahoma is because I think TCU has been very streaky this year. There's times that they look really, really good, and then there's times where that offense can't move the ball. Oklahoma has been more consistent offensively. But like you said, defensively, they give up a lot of points. So we're now saying that Wisconsin is done, Oklahoma is done, brings us to number 2. And at this point, do you think Georgia can beat Auburn? There's a fighter's chance there that Georgia could beat Auburn. Auburn's playing some good football right now, but they do have 2 losses. So for the sake of this show, Kevin, and where I want to go with it, let's say Georgia wins. And ultimately, if I'm picking a winner, I think I might have to give the edge to Auburn. But I think Georgia can win this game. And like I said, for the sake of the show, I'm going to, at the end, I want to see the scenario with this all 4 losing, and maybe we'll have Clemson versus Miami. I'm not letting the cat out of the bag. I think Clemson will win that game. But number 2, Auburn, I think Georgia can win, but I think Auburn will eke this one out after their big win against Alabama.
I would agree. I think Auburn's the better overall team. I think Auburn's got a legitimate defense for sure. They've got a couple injuries to their top 2 running backs. I think their best running back is questionable for the game. Might be their second one, Kerwin Williams, I believe his name is. But regardless, I think Auburn's a little nicked up. They're coming off a huge win over Alabama. They won that game by, I think it was 12 points. So you can understand a letdown game after beating Bama 26-14.
A game they thoroughly dominated, Kevin. I had to interrupt you because I think the score was closer than that game.
Right.
Auburn took it to Alabama. Literally. Like, it wasn't a last-second field goal. They physically and mentally beat up Alabama like I've never seen before. Yeah.
Yeah, Auburn's, to me, right now, honestly, Auburn's playing like the best team in the country. I didn't even get to their quarterback, Jarrett Stidham, who came from Baylor, but he was a big recruit coming out of high school. Transferred from Baylor, goes to Auburn because Baylor's got issue after issue. But he's a legitimate quarterback. So Auburn's got a legitimate running game, a legitimate quarterback, a legitimate defense for sure, probably a top 5 defense in college. Almost no question about it to me. So I like Stidham. I like the running game. I like their offense. I love their defense. I think Auburn's probably the most consistent, best team in the country now. Like you said, Auburn has 2 losses. Week 2, they lost at Clemson by 8 points. And then it was week 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, so probably week 8. They lost to LSU 27-23. So that was a close loss. Since then, they killed Arkansas, basically beat down Texas A&M, killed Georgia, number 1 Georgia at the time. Auburn handed them that loss 40-17. So they annihilated Georgia by 23 points earlier this year. Then they play Louisiana Monroe, which that brings up a whole nother topic. But then they beat Alabama by 12 points. So they've been cruising since that close loss to LSU. And again, they lost week 2 to Clemson by 8 points. at Clemson. So I think Auburn now is a completely different team, and they're much better than what their 10-2 record says. I'll say that much. I know Alabama would say that much, and Georgia would say that much. Auburn took it to Georgia as well. You said they took it to Alabama a week ago. They took it to Georgia a month ago. Auburn's legit. They're probably the number one team in the country. A lot of people liked Auburn to beat Alabama a week ago. That was not an unpopular take. And those people were absolutely correct. I thought Bama in a big game would step up and do it, but they did not.
And the only reason they're number 2, Kevin, is because of what I said before with my applause.
Yep.
The committee. The committee has done it right. I was watching social media after that game saying Auburn should be number 1. Auburn should be number 1. No, they shouldn't be because they lost to Clemson.
Right.
And the committee got it right. But there's a lot of people, like you said, Kevin, are they a better team right now than Clemson? I think they are. I think you play that game again, I think Auburn can win. But the committee is doing things right, and I love it. I love it. They're number 2. For the sake of the show, let's say Georgia finds a way to win. So now 2, 3, and 4, all out, Kevin. All of them are out. And that brings up Clemson versus Miami. I can't even, for the sake of the show, give this game to Miami. I can't, and here's why. Miami's loss is against the University of Pittsburgh. And I'm taking everything away from the University of Pittsburgh. They're not a good football team. If you want to be a college football playoff team, you cannot lose to Pitt. Pitt's rebuilding. Pitt's trying to find identity. Pitt's trying to find a quarterback. Pitt's trying to find everything, and Miami overlooked them. And I just look at it this way. I've never been sold on Miami climbing up the charts, a little bit like Wisconsin. I think Miami's a good, solid college football team. Do I think they're one of the best in the country? No. Do I think they're as good as Clemson? No. So I think Clemson wins this, and even for the sake of the show, I can't even say that I give Miami a chance against Clemson. You might think different, youngster, but that's my take.
I'm with you. I think Clemson's the better team. I, like you, I basically wholeheartedly agree with all your points you just made there. I think Miami's probably around the 7th to 10th best team in the country. I think Wisconsin's probably around the 7th to 10th best team in the country. Ohio State's inconsistent. Ohio State can play like the number 1 team in the country, and they can play like losing by 30 to Iowa. They're inconsistent. You don't know what you're getting week to week from Ohio State. But I think Miami's, like you said, they're a solid football team with talent, not incredible elite talent all over the field. Clemson's got a number of, 5-star recruits here and there. They're legit. You've got a first-year quarterback in Kelly Bryant, who is playing in this game. Didn't play for much of the game against Syracuse, the only loss they had. That's why the committee never really killed Clemson for that loss. I think they should have been hurt more from that loss than what the committee initially did. But as you can see, Clemson's number 1 right now. If they were number 2, 3, 4, doesn't matter to me. They're still 11-1. When their quarterback plays, they're 11-0 for at least a half. So I can't kill them too much for that loss. But especially if they beat Miami here, Clemson's the more talented, better team. They are. They've got a better defense. Quarterback-wise, maybe it's a 50-50 shot because of how young Kelly Bryant is. But in general, I think Clemson wins the football game as well. To me, in general, I think that Clemson wins over Miami. I think that, let's see, we've got Auburn and Georgia. To me, I think Auburn wins. To me, I think Oklahoma beats TCU. To me, I think Ohio State beats Wisconsin. But for the sake of the argument, Troy, you had number 2, 3, and 4 going down.
Yeah, because I just wanted to throw it out there to show you how many options are available here. So you have 2, 3, and 4 going down, which means that Georgia wins, means Ohio State wins, and it means that and TCU wins.
Yeah.
Now this is where you get all discombobbled, because all three of those teams are ranked below Alabama. But all three of those teams just got a top 4 win. Do you vault all of them ahead of Alabama, Kevin, or do you look at it and say, well, let's now use our human side and say, well, TCU didn't. That game was too close. Oklahoma lost on a last-second field goal. Georgia, they looked pretty good. We're going to move Alabama up, or we're going to keep, a TCU up. My thing is, Kevin, if the committee is being consistent, they've now literally Alabama's idle. They've done nothing. The 3 teams below them just had a top 4 win. They've got to move up. Or do you slide Alabama all the way up to number 2 because they didn't play, but then again, who are you going to keep out? That's why I wanted to bring this up for sake of argument and get your thoughts. Because if those 3 upsets happen, what do you do if you're the committee? Does Alabama then slide up even though they didn't play?
I think that Bama could – I think Bama can't stay ahead of Miami if Miami wins. I think Miami would be 11-1 right there with Bama, and the last thing you see from Miami is beating the number 1 team, Clemson. And you see Alabama sitting on the sidelines doing nothing. So, yeah, I think Miami from 7 catches number 5 Bama. I don't think that's ludicrous. I think if Georgia beats Auburn, Georgia's sitting there at number 6. Would they jump number 5 Alabama after beating the number 2 team in the country who just took it to Alabama? Of course you'd put Georgia over Alabama in that scenario if Georgia beats Auburn, for sure. A better overall record if that's all you look at. They just beat the team that just beat Alabama. Alabama has no wins since then. So, yeah, Georgia would move up past Alabama. Miami would move up past Alabama. Ohio State is where it gets interesting because Ohio State has 2 losses. And you factor in what those 2 losses are. You can look at Auburn's losses. You can look at Ohio State's losses. You got a 4-point loss to LSU. If you're Auburn, LSU is the number 17 team in the country. Auburn lost to the number 1 team in the country by 8 points week 2. You can't kill them too much for that. But Ohio State, you can look and say, well, week 2, they lost to Oklahoma. Ohio State was at home, though, and Auburn was not. And Oklahoma pretty much handled Ohio State, and this coming from an Ohio State guy. I like Ohio State football. But Oklahoma took it to Ohio State for sure, week 2. No question about that. And then you have the 30-point loss at Iowa. That's just – once that happened, not even to say 2 losses, but if you're losing by 30 points to Iowa, to me, you don't deserve to be in. I think if Ohio State pulls a 2014 and crushes Wisconsin, I don't think they'll crush them 59-0, but 2014, they crushed Wisconsin 59-0. They slide into the top 4 because of that. Because that's the last you saw of Ohio State. Like, my God, this team can just obliterate anyone. Because Wisconsin was very solid that year. That's why they made the Big Ten championship game. And then Ohio State sneaks in as a top 4 team because they absolutely obliterate Wisconsin. I was sitting there watching it with one of my friends. I'll never forget that game because a 59-0 victory, sitting there with your friend who's rooting for the opposite team, he could not say too many words during that game. But so Ohio State gets in the Final Four. Obviously, they win the whole thing in 2014. They could be the best team in the country. If Ohio State does that again to Wisconsin, and so you're beating the number 4 team who's ahead of Bama, I don't know which way the committee goes, but just history telling you, you're seeing Alabama not play a conference championship game, and you're seeing Ohio State beat Wisconsin by 2, 3, 4 scores. I don't know how you leave Ohio State out necessarily in that scenario. If Ohio State wins a close one, I absolutely could see Alabama staying ahead of Ohio State. You say, okay, Ohio State beat the number 4 team in the country, and okay, by 3, 4 points, maybe 6, 7. Ohio State's favored by 6 over Wisconsin for you betting people. No lock of the week from me, I'll say that. But in general, to me, Ohio State, if they bury Wisconsin, I think they're in. If they win a close one, to me it's a toss-up. Because, again, Alabama, number 62 strength of schedule in the country. Wisconsin's number 63, the last time I checked. So strength of schedule-wise, Bama's got nothing on Ohio State. Ohio State's got a big win over Penn State. You've got a big win over Wisconsin as your last impression for the College Football Playoff Committee. So if they bury Wisconsin, I would feel good about Ohio State moving into the top 4. If they win kind of a close one and it's not that convincing, and you sit there and you say, okay, here's Ohio State, you got 2 losses. Here's Bama, you got 1 loss. They only lost to Auburn. And say Auburn wins and beats Georgia. It's like, okay, how bad is that loss to Auburn? That's not too bad. Even if Georgia beats Auburn. Okay, how loss is that bad to Auburn if you're Alabama? Auburn lost to Clemson. They lost to Georgia at that point, and you lost to LSU by 4 points. So all 3 top 20 teams, 2 top 4 teams at that point, Georgia and Clemson. So, Alabama's got no bad losses. They just have no good wins either. Their best win is LSU, who's, again, number 17. So it's a solid win, but it's nothing that great. Ohio State could have beaten Penn State, who's number 9, and could possibly beat number 4 Wisconsin. You've got impressive wins there. It'll be, to me, probably a coin flip, again, unless Ohio State crushes Wisconsin. I don't think it happens. I didn't think it would happen in 2014. So they proved me wrong then. Maybe it can happen this time. Maybe if Ohio State's up 14, 13, 10-0 after the first quarter, and Wisconsin has to throw it, and you're getting pick sixes and 2-3 interceptions from Hornibrook, maybe the game does get out of hand. But I think it stays close. I don't see Ohio State running away with it. I just see them winning a 27-20 game. That's what I see. But at that point, 2-loss Ohio State with a 30-point loss to Iowa mixed in there with a slight victory over Wisconsin against a 1-loss Alabama team that only lost to Auburn, who looks like almost the best team in the country right now, then I can see a coin flip happening. Because, yeah, it's impressive that Ohio State beats Wisconsin, but that 30-point loss to Iowa, that may be the dagger in Ohio State's resume, and I wouldn't fault it. If Ohio State beats Wisconsin by a touchdown, and again, I'm an Ohio State fan. I hope they get in. I hope they win the whole thing. But 2 losses, 30-point loss to Iowa, you're going to keep outnumber Alabama, who only has 1 loss, as opposed to Ohio State's 2, and Bama's 1 loss came against Auburn. I can fully see Alabama staying ahead of Ohio State. Just for the sake of argument, you've got TCU at number 11, too, before I hand it off to you, Troy. These are my final thoughts on this whole college football playoff going forward. But if TCU wins and beats Oklahoma, you've got to jump USC, Penn State, Ohio State, Miami, Georgia, and Alabama just to get in there. And again, Georgia would replace Auburn, and Miami would replace Clemson. TCU at 11, I don't think is passing Alabama. TCU also 10-2 like Ohio State, but Ohio State at times looks like the best team in the country. TCU never looks like the best team in the country. Eye test, you're never going to say, yeah, TCU, they're definitely better than Alabama. Ohio State sometimes, yeah. Last 57 minutes against Penn State, yeah, Ohio State probably beats Alabama. But TCU to go from 11 to 4, I don't see that happening. Ohio State from 8 to 4, I think it's a possibility, especially if they crush Wisconsin, and I think it's a good possibility. But Miami beating Clemson, they're in. Georgia beating Auburn, they're in. But once you get to Ohio State beating Wisconsin, I don't know who you take. 1-loss Bama, 2-loss Ohio State. That, to me, is going to be the coin flip.
Well, that's why I threw out these little scenarios, Kevin. So let's go another one, and that's, you've already talked about it. Top 3 all win, Wisconsin loses. At that point, I think you see Alabama slide into the playoff. But as an Ohio State fan, you're hoping 1, 2, and 3 win because, well, you actually probably want TCU to win.
Yeah.
You want TCU to win because they're ranked 11th. And like you said, even if TCU wins, Ohio State wins, you're not jumping TCU over Ohio State at any given time then. But they just beat Oklahoma, which means Oklahoma has to fall, and Wisconsin will be out. That means one of the spots can be solidified then by Alabama, and then Ohio State would be the only other team in that little tier that beat a top 4. And at that point, you can then vault Ohio State right up behind Alabama at 4.
Right.
Would the committee move Alabama to 3 should Oklahoma and Wisconsin lose? You almost have to, because look who's behind Alabama. There's nobody else that would be relevant to move in there.
Right.
Like you said, you're probably not going to put Ohio State ahead of Alabama, but if 3 and 4 lose, at that point I could see Alabama moving to 3, Ohio State sliding into 4, but 1 and 2 would have to win.
Yeah.
That would have to happen. So there's so many scenarios, and you and I could probably sit here and go through every single one, and then the sun would be coming up in the morning, because that's how many that's how many possibilities there are out there. Now I know I wanted to do a dual show. I don't have anything else on college football. Don't have a lot on college basketball this week. But I did want to start off with this, Kevin. This is a Big Ten show, and everybody knows I'm a Badger fan. My wonderful Wisconsin Badgers, I mentioned it in our preview. Where's the offense outside of Hap going to come from? And when they're not scoring, it could get ugly. And it got ugly against Virginia. I know Virginia is a lockdown defense, Kevin. They always have been. Tony Bennett, Green Bay guy, actually graduated the same year from a crosstown high school in Green Bay. Met him I wasn't friends with him, met him in passing a couple of times. But he follows in his father's footsteps. Defense, 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 defense. You want to come to Virginia and be a superstar scoring guy, don't come here. You're going to play defense. They can lock down the best of teams. But Wisconsin only scoring 37, Kevin. I got to give credit to Virginia, but it goes to my point that this is going to be a very, very long year for Badger fans. I don't think they have it. I think they've got to have a year to get things together, bring in another recruiting class, because I don't know where the other scoring's coming from, especially when you look at those very good defenses. I'm not saying they're going to find defense like that in the Big Ten night in and night out, but, man, when they struggle offensively, they're horrid. They're just horrid. That's how I'll put it. So I wanted to get your quick thoughts on that game. It was a whopper of a game if you're a basketball fan. If you like scoring, you probably had to turn it off, because 49-37 in like a Duke-Michigan State game, that's almost a halftime score. That's almost a halftime score. But for Wisconsin-Virginia, that was the final. Yes, folks, that was the final. 49-37. What were your thoughts on that game real quick, Kevin?
Yeah, understandable. For Virginia, Wisconsin, I wanted to leave college football with this. If you're an Ohio State fan and you want to, what should you be rooting for? Clemson beating Miami, probably good, because if Miami beats Clemson and you're sitting there, Clemson with 2 losses, Ohio State with 2 losses, hey, who do we put in? Maybe there's a decision there to be made. You just want Clemson to win. That's one spot taken care of, done. You don't want potentially 2 ACC teams in there. Auburn playing Georgia, I think you want Georgia to beat Auburn if you're an Ohio State fan, because then you look at Alabama and it's like, okay, who do we take, Bama or Ohio State? Oh, yeah, Bama lost by 12 to Auburn, and Auburn just lost. They lost their 3rd game. That's not a great loss. I think it's a quality loss for sure, but it dings Auburn's resume a little. Yes, Georgia's in there. You've got an SEC team in there no matter what, but at least Alabama's loss looks a little worse. So I think you're hoping, as an Ohio State fan, for Georgia to beat Auburn. Oklahoma, if they lose, great, because TCU's not going to jump you if you're Ohio State and you win. That potentially opens up another spot. And then you've got Ohio State, Wisconsin. I think if you're an Ohio State fan, you're hoping Ohio State wins that game. Just a random thought there. For Ohio
I would
State,
sure
Wisconsin.
hope that an Ohio State fan is cheering for Ohio State to win, Kevin. I really hope so.
I would assume, and I wanted to end it with this too. We're going to talk about the rest of these teams too once their bowl games come, but Iowa beats Nebraska last week. They crushed them by 40. We're not even talking about all the news to come from this past week from the Big Ten, like Nebraska's coach getting fired. Who's Nebraska going to hire? Hats off to Iowa beating Nebraska, though. We'll talk about that stuff at some point later. Ohio State beats Michigan. That's just nothing to, well, I've got stuff to talk about as an Ohio State fan, but regardless, I was impressed by Dwayne Haskins taking over for J.T. Barrett. Hats off to Ohio State winning that game. Wisconsin crushes Minnesota. Hats off to them. Finishing the regular season 12-0. That's unbelievable. Penn State crushing Maryland. That's to be expected. Michigan State crushing Rutgers. To be expected. Northwestern crushing Illinois. To be expected. Hats off to those teams. Purdue beats Indiana by a touchdown. Purdue's 6-6. They'll go to a bowl game. That's cool. But yeah, we haven't gone into Greg Schiano potentially going to Tennessee, and then Tennessee almost, signing the letter, signing the contract, but then at the last second saying no. The media's been all over that one. But yeah, we'll talk about that stuff in weeks to come. But we're doing a combo show here, not a ton of time left. So moving to college basketball, you asked about Wisconsin, Virginia. Finally. Again, Virginia loves to slow it down, play great defense, get efficient looks on offense. Wisconsin likes to slow it down, play good defense, and get efficient, good looks on offense. I mean, they're of the same mold, and Virginia's just a better mold of it just because of what's on their roster right now, this second. At the end of the year, maybe Wisconsin beats Virginia. A lot of teams can beat Virginia because Virginia likes to play games in the 40s. So, yeah, you score 52 points, you can beat Virginia. It's absolutely hard to. That's why Virginia wins almost 30 games a year. But a lot of teams can beat Virginia. It's just a struggle to score points against them. So I don't take a ton from Wisconsin scoring 37 in that one. I mean, Wisconsin scored 70 on UCLA. They scored 65 against Baylor. They scored 70 against Xavier. They scored 89, 85 against two Cupcakes, 71 against UWM. I think Wisconsin, I don't take much from scoring very little against Virginia because nobody scores a lot on Virginia. But like you said, Troy, they're 3-4. They've played three Cupcakes. They've beaten them. You've played number 15 Xavier, lost. Number 22 Baylor, lost. Number 23 UCLA, lost. Number 18 Virginia, lost. That's the issue. I don't think it's necessarily a huge scoring issue. I think in general you're playing good basketball teams, and you're just not able to necessarily even clamp down defensively. You're giving up 80 points, giving up 70, giving up 72. You give up 49 to Virginia, but that's Virginia.
That's a lot for Virginia.
So, in general, I think there are a lot of issues with Wisconsin, and you mentioned where's the scoring going to come from. Happ's averaging 17 and 9. He's shooting 58% from the field. He's doing just fine. He leads the team in assists per game as well, leads the team in blocks. The only thing he doesn't lead the team in is steals, which he's second in. So Happ's doing his thing. Brad Davison, that's a guy who's second on the team in scoring. He's a freshman. I figured he'd be able to make an impact. Kobe King, I thought would make more of an impact. He's only scoring 4 points a game. I thought he could potentially lead the team in scoring. Obviously, I was wrong there. But, yeah, I mean, if you're leaning on a freshman and Dimitri Trice to be the next great guys for this team as freshman and sophomore, along with a sophomore and Happ, to pick up that scoring load, it's just not happening yet. And defensively, this team's still young. They're still understanding the system. You've got a couple key freshmen in there. You've got a lot of sophomores playing significant minutes. It's just a young Wisconsin team that doesn't have a lot of answers outside of Ethan Happ. And so, to me, I don't take a ton from the Virginia final score, but losing to your only four good opponents at this point, as we're recording the show, they're 3-4. They play Ohio State December 2nd. I expect that to be a win. And then they play our loved Penn State team on the road, so that'll be a fun game December 4th. On ESPN2, easily watching that one because Troy and I both love Penn State. If you missed our preview show for the Big Ten college basketball, go to thegruelingtruth.net. Check out our Go Big or Go Home show, and we did it a couple weeks ago previewing the college basketball season. But for me, I mean, I just want to go through basically each Big Ten team, not every single game and whatnot, but just games that stood out. I'll hand it back to you, Troy. I'm sure you've got something.
No, I really don't have anything. This part of the season for me in college basketball. There's so much going on in the world of sports. I mean, I follow it. I'll watch the highlights. I'll look at the scores. I'll do some internet stuff. But, right now, unless it's one of those marquee matchups or it's Wisconsin, you mentioned that they lost to 4 good teams. Well, that's the problem. It means you're not a tournament team. You got to win those games, or at least find a way to be competitive and make it real close. I just don't think they're ready for the tournament. And I know it's 7 games in, but, early season, you can tell a lot. And they could turn it around. Big Ten play is different than a non-conference. But right now in college basketball, you look at it, Kevin, to me it's not I'm going to follow it religiously. But for me, I'll turn in and tune into the big games. Michigan State, Duke. Those are nice. The ACC Big Ten Challenge, I like that one a lot. But a lot of these little tournaments, like even the one in Wisconsin played in, the only reason I'm watching is because it's Wisconsin, right? But, these little, Lowe's home improvement tournament, or the Walmart shootout. They're 4 teams basically playing each other, or 6 teams, or however many teams, and you're going to play this team first and then one of these 2 teams second. And it's not really a tournament, so to speak. It's just a couple of games. But right now, teams are trying to find out what they're going to do. But I'm going to tell you, the team at the top, your Dukies, they've got they're cruising. They're looking like a very dominant team, like we thought they would be. And there's teams out there right now that you wish the tournament would be next week because they're playing really good basketball. So we got a lot of basketball to go. And for me, Kevin, really, the season gets interesting, and it's kind of ironic that we started this show after the Christmas break. I believe is when we started it, right? Sometime in February.
I think it was like January 2nd, I think.
Yeah,
January. I think it was very early January.
Yeah, January. To me, that's when the season really gets intense because you've had some conference games. You've had a handful, 7, 8 of them already. And you're starting to see in these teams where they're falling out in the conference. So right now, to me, it's just kind of like, following these teams, seeing what's going on. Like you said, I am a Badger fan, so I get a little probably more invested in how I feel. But for all these other teams, I look at it and say, okay, here's what's going on. You got a lot of games left. It's non-conference. But when the conference starts, that's when you put your foot on the gas and you're just like, man, let's start enjoying college basketball. But as far as breaking down teams today, I don't feel the need that I'm going to get into anything because, I've watched enough, I've seen enough, and I can't say, wow, this team is really impressive early in the season. It's 7 games in, Kevin. But I did want to mention, Duke, they do. They look like nobody can touch them right now. But I don't feel that I'm going to go out there and say, this team is really impressing me because it is a lot of non-conference. I know some teams have good quality opponents. The Badgers scheduled, when the schedule came out, they probably didn't know those 4 teams are going to be in the top 25, but they were, and they're good programs. So there are schools that do schedule tougher opponents, but for the most part, you can look at a team that's 8-0 and say, ooh, they're 8-0. Yeah, well, who did you play? You got to look at that. So the Badgers at 3-4. Typically, to be honest, Kevin, I thought they could be a little better. I thought they might be like 5-2. So that's maybe where my concern is, that they haven't beaten a good team. But it goes to my point. The team can be there, that 3-4. People are just going to look at the Badgers and say, oh, they're bad. And they kind of are. But they've also, like you said, their 4 losses are against top 25, so that's good for their schedule. Yeah. And on the flip side, you can look at a team that's 7-8-1 and be like, ooh, look at that team. No, they're playing, Houston A&M and, Alaska Fairbanks. And again, nothing against programs like that, but there's a reason that these schools scheduled you because they're trying to tune up for their conference. So until that really happens to me, Kevin, I'm not going to sit here and say, impressed, not impressed, impressed, not impressed, because to me, a lot of those teams are doing it. And so a lot of it is padding their record. I mean, I don't know the records offhand, but I was going down it, and I think Illinois even had a very good record at this point. You know, and the thing is that I'm not going to say, ooh, well, look at Illinois. They got a better record than Wisconsin. Are they better than Wisconsin? I don't think so. But record-wise, you'd think they were. So that's where I'm at. It was probably a long-winded response as far as the college basketball side goes. But I'm just getting excited for December because that's when conference play starts. You mentioned it. The 2nd of December, Wisconsin plays Ohio State. So when conference play starts, now I can really bear down. I can take a look at these teams, and I can get a good feel for who they really are in their respective conferences, not even the Big Ten. You know, you can look at the ACC and say, okay, these teams are now out of the non-conference into conference play, because you and I both know, Kevin, every conference has some kind of identity. Most of the teams are going to follow an identity, and we mentioned it about coaches, new coaches coming into the Big Ten. How are they going to adapt their style of play to how you play in the Big Ten? And so that's what I'm excited for. Long-winded response. I'll turn it back over to you.
It's all good. I thought it was all good stuff because, you can be 3-4 Wisconsin at this point and think, wow, that's pretty bad. And you can look at Illinois, and they're 6-1. They started 6-0. Be like, wow, Illinois is a pretty good team. Well, not necessarily. Look at who Illinois beat. I'm going to get into that. I literally want to go through every team's schedule in my head. I'm in front of a computer. I'll be able to look. But I just wanted to point out key games to take at this point from the first, I guess we're almost a month in, 3 weeks in, to the college basketball season. Actually, more like 2 full weeks. But so in general, I just wanted to go through the top 25 as well. Duke at number 1, Kansas 2. And from this point on, I'll just talk about Big Ten teams. So Michigan State at 3. I love that Michigan State didn't fall far. I love that Michigan State's still 3 in the country. Just because you lose to Duke doesn't mean you're a bad team. Doesn't mean you should slide down the polls. Being number 3, I think that's awesome. They deserve to be number 3. I think they're the second best team in the country. Well, I still think they're going to be the best team in the country by the end. But regardless, Michigan State, and I'm a Duke basketball fan. So you've learned that I'm an Ohio State football fan, Duke basketball fan if you haven't listened to this show before. But in general, Duke, really good team. Michigan State, still a really good team. That's nothing changed. Seeing Duke beat Michigan State for me, I think those are the top 2 teams in the country. I expect them to be playing, hopefully, in the championship game if they can. Otherwise, they'll meet in the Final Four because I think they'll both be 1 seeds. But outside of Michigan State for the Big Ten at number 3, looking down, I mean, I'm scrolling down right now. I don't have immense notes on anything. I'm kind of doing this off the cuff because the last few days for me have been a little nuts, as you can tell by my flaming car if you saw on my Twitter account. But for the Big Ten, Minnesota at number 12. I think that's pretty cool. I think Minnesota is a legit team. Both Troy and I like Minnesota this year. For the Big Ten, I'm still scrolling down. I think that's literally it for the Big Ten. Purdue's barely on the outside with receiving votes. I'm looking for other teams. Northwestern's in there. That makes sense. They've been a little disappointing to start. And Maryland's got another vote. So I think you've got a solid amount of good teams in the Big Ten. You know, you've got 3 or 4 teams right now receiving votes. You've got Wisconsin not receiving votes. I think they will eventually be a solid basketball team. Maybe not as good as I thought. Maybe I overhyped Wisconsin in the beginning of the year when I said they're probably the 6th or 7th best team in the country. Or not the country, sorry, the Big Ten. And maybe
I was
they
going
won't.
to say, youngster, how many of those flames did you inhale?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
Woo. Yeah, I know you had them like around 6. I dropped them a little bit further than that. But you know, again, they have time and they've played. You know, here's the thing. I always love adding stuff, and you mentioned it too. When we comment, we can piggyback off each other because we think of these great things. Wisconsin playing this tough non-conference schedule is only going to help them in the Big Ten because they are a middle-of-the-pack team. But in that middle of the pack, if you mentioned it on the preview show, a middle-of-the-pack team, Kevin, 2 more wins can move you up 4 spots that easily in the middle of the pack. So that could be the difference, Wisconsin being number 8 in the Big Ten or number 4 in the Big Ten or 5. If they can pull off one of those close victories, a game they weren't supposed to win, and these 4 tough non-conference games, yeah, they had 3 cupcakes. But so be it. Everybody plays cupcakes. Those 4 games can really help them understand some things about themselves. I don't want to say wins and losses don't matter right now, but really they don't. They really don't to me until you get to conference play. And I think that helps a team like Wisconsin that played a tough schedule because in the Big Ten, like you mentioned in the preview, if Wisconsin can pull off those extra 2 wins, that's huge. That can be, like I just said, from an 8th seed or the 8th place team to the 4th or 5th place. Because I don't even know if you remember, Kevin, what was it that I can't remember what team you said, but if they had 2 more wins, they would have went from like 7th place to 3rd or something like that.
It's even more drastic. That was the first point I was going to bring up. Was Wisconsin last year in the Big Ten standings finished 12-6 in Big Ten play? They were number 2 in the Big Ten tournament at 12-6. At number 8 was Iowa at 10-8. 2 games difference from 2 to 8 last year in the Big Ten. So every win matters in Big Ten play. Yeah,
that's why I brought it up. So that's really all I had to say there. Continue with where you're going to go. If you want to add about other teams, go right ahead.
Yeah, all I basically wanted to do was literally go through live with listeners here about team schedules, what I make of them. I'm literally going to go through each team schedule and point out things that are interesting to me, literally going through every Big Ten team. I'm not going to make this long. But outside of that, I've got nothing more to talk about with college basketball. But so I'll start with Illinois. They're the top team alphabetically in the Big Ten. Like I said before, they're 6-1. They started the year 6-0. Just looking at their schedule, impressive that they're scoring a lot of points. That was to be expected with new coach Brad Underwood from Oklahoma State. We said that this team should be able to score more because you're inheriting an offensive coach. And that's been the case. And Troy, I guess going forward, feel free to interject with whatever thoughts you have. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep rolling on.
Well, I was just going to say, that's great that he's scoring a lot of points, but he's doing it in the non-conference. He's not doing it in the Big Ten when Big Ten plays defense.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see what he does when he gets into that Big Ten play. And that, again, goes back to my point. I can't tell an identity of a team in a non-conference schedule. Name 2 teams that they beat, Kevin.
Well, I was going Southern and Tennessee Martin.
There you go, Southern and Tennessee Martin. Put them in the Big Ten. Do they win a game? Probably not. So it's great that they're scoring points, but I really have to see what happens when he gets into the Big Ten. Are they going to continue the scoring tirade? Probably not. Yeah,
that's the take that I have from Illinois. They started the year 6-0. ACC Big Ten Challenge happened for them. As we're recording this, there are still some teams' games to be played tonight. Indiana plays Duke. Good luck to Indiana there. I think Purdue has a good game as well. I don't remember off the top of my head. I'll have to check. But Illinois plays Northwestern, the ACC Big Ten Challenge. Illinois played at Wake Forest. They lost 80-73. So Illinois is 6-1, but they've only played one decent team in Wake Forest, and they lost. I think DePaul's on the come-up. That's their second toughest game. They won that one. I think DePaul's better than what people think of DePaul basketball. I think they're going to be better this year. But still, you're playing 6 fairly easy games. You win all 6 of them. It's cool. But then you travel to Wake Forest, who's not this juggernaut right now, and you lose that game. So we'll see when Big Ten play starts. That was the other note I wanted to make. before going into every other team's schedule and just kind of diagnosing little points, was that Big Ten play kind of starts early December. Like I mentioned, Wisconsin December 2nd, Illinois December 1st. They travel to Northwestern. But it seems like just kind of a note that Big Ten play starts December 1st, December 2nd for most Big Ten teams. Most teams have 2 Big Ten games right in a row. Like Illinois plays December 1st, December 3rd against Northwestern and Maryland. And then they've got about 5 more non-conference games, and then conference play doesn't kick off again until January. So you're getting a little taste this upcoming week. Friday and Sunday, Illinois has Big Ten games. Just Wisconsin, since I have their page up, they play Ohio State December 2nd, Saturday, and then Monday, December 4th, they play Penn State. And then you've got Temple, Marquette, Western Kentucky, Green Bay, Chicago State, UMass Lowell. That's 6 games, non-conference. And then you get into January 2nd, Indiana, and then they play Rutgers, Nebraska, Purdue, Illinois, Iowa. That's true Big Ten play, but you're getting a taste in early December, just for those people kind of curious about when Big Ten play starts, when to look for it. Early December, you've got a couple Big Ten games between teams, and then you're going to see a non-conference stretch up until January. Then once the new calendar year hits, that's when you're really seeing Big Ten play. But that's all I've got on Illinois. I am literally going through alphabetically and going to Indiana and their schedule. They lost their opening game to Indiana State. That was kind of interesting. Another new head coach there in Archie Miller. They are 4-2 right now. They lost at Seton Hall, who's number 22 in the country. That's understandable. And they beat 4 Cupcakes. That's what Indiana's done to this point. Like I said, Wednesday, November 29th, you're probably not listening to the show before this game since it's in a couple hours. But Indiana plays Duke. That'll be tough. Then Indiana plays Michigan and Iowa before they have a non-conference stretch. And the non-conference stretch includes Louisville and Notre Dame. So Indiana could be in a little bit of a hurt before they play a few Cupcakes prior to true Big Ten season in January. Not a ton to take from Indiana. I think they're rebuilding. This is going to be a rebuilding year in year one for Archie Miller going forward. I don't expect them to make the tournament. I will move on to Iowa, and I will check their schedule. And they are 4-3, and they've beaten 4 Cupcakes, and they've lost their last game. They lost at Virginia Tech by 24 points. That's kind of alarming. I think Iowa's a pretty solid team. Losing to Virginia Tech by 24 surprises me. Their next game is against Penn State. That'll definitely be interesting to me because, like you, Troy, I think Penn State's going to be an interesting watch who could be an NCAA tournament team this year. They play them December 2nd. That's Iowa's next game. Not a ton to take from Iowa, but that Virginia Tech final score is an interesting one. Maryland, they've surprised me a little bit. They beat Butler by 14 early in the year. They beat New Mexico by 15. New Mexico's always decent. And they just lost at Syracuse by 2 points. You can't take a ton from that loss. At Syracuse is a tough place to win, and at Syracuse, they're always good. So I think Maryland has impressed me. I think Wisconsin, it's kind of upsetting that they haven't beaten one top 25 team in 4 chances. So I put Maryland and Wisconsin in the same tier, Troy. I know you didn't. And Maryland, to me, has impressed me a little bit, while Wisconsin's kind of leaving me wanting more.
Yeah, like I said, Wisconsin, I'm a little more critical. Maryland, I wasn't really sold too much on. Well, I'll say it this way. I wanted to see some stuff from Maryland, and I said I thought they'd be a better team this year because there's no Trimble. And they're going out and they're playing. I think this is another team that you got to look at and say they got to use the non-conference, and they're playing a pretty tough non-conference to get ready for Big Ten play, and I appreciate that as a fan. That's what they're going to do. That's awesome. So we'll see what happens with this Maryland team. I think they've got to figure out how they're going to play with no Trimble. They had Trimble for how many years, and now they have to find a new identity. And for teams like Wisconsin, they've got to find a new identity as far as who's the go-to guy. I know they got Happ, but you look at all the guys that they lost. So, I look at Maryland and Wisconsin. Maybe as far as where they finish, going to be different where I had them in the preseason or my ranking. But as far as the way the programs are set up and what they're trying to accomplish, I think they're both on the same page.
Yeah. Maryland plays Purdue next. If they win that one, they should beat Illinois the next game. And then we talked about their non-conference schedule, and it was pretty decent. Unfortunately, the month of December, it's not. But if they beat Purdue, I mean, they could be 7-2, 8-2, 9-2, 10, 11, 12, 13-2 going into January and playing Penn State January 2nd. You could very easily see Maryland as a top 25 team going into
Kevin, I want to mention this because you said, well, their non-conference in December not too great. If you look at this, we talked about the Big Ten play actually kicking off in early December. But at that point, you've now started conference, and how do I want to explain this? Early in the season, like right out of the gate, and I'll bring my coaching experience into this. You want your team to get some minutes. You want your team to get some experience. You want to play. So playing cupcakes, I understand it. But you want to be prepared. Then, as you get ready to get into the conference play, people can argue with me and say, well, that's when you should play your toughest opponents. I disagree because so much effort is exerted in conference play. 18 games in the Big Ten, right, Kevin? 18 of them.
Yeah.
Do you want to schedule, if you're Michigan State, a Duke the week before Christmas? No. Do you want to schedule a North Carolina A&M? Yes. If that makes any sense to you. And that's the way you have to look at this is early in the season, the teams like the Maryland and Wisconsin are playing these good teams. I appreciate that. Them playing their cupcakes in the middle stretch right before the Big Ten season, I'm okay with that. Because at this point, you're going to have, 8-9 games under your belt. You've probably figured some stuff out. You don't want to exert your starters to the extent that you're going to wear them out in December. Because 18 games in the Big Ten, that's a lot. Hopefully that made sense.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. And 16 of those come back to back. So, yeah, it makes perfect sense to test yourself a little bit when the season starts. Then you get a little taste of Big Ten play. And then in December, leading up to those 16 straight Big Ten games, you don't want, killer after killer after killer, juggernaut teams to wear your team out going into a 16-game conference stretch. So, yeah, it makes sense to test yourself a little bit early. Some teams test themselves more. And then in December, you take a little bit off, kind of learn just about your team, what works, get some wins under your belt, because you want 20 as a college basketball team. That's kind of the benchmark. Win 20 games, finish in the upper half of your Power 5 conference, and you've got a good shot at making the 68-field team field. A lot of teams make it, go 20-11, win a game in your conference tournament, and you should be fine for the most part. So win 20 games, you're going to have cupcakes. That's a 35-game college basketball season for you. You're going to have cupcakes in there. No question about it. I'll move on to Michigan. They beat VCU by 8. You got a lot of cupcakes in there, but their only loss, they're 6-1. They lost to LSU by 2. I don't think that's a terrible loss, and it's 2 points. So Michigan doing fine against their cupcakes. They play at North Carolina tonight. That was the other Big Ten ACC Challenge game I was thinking of. That was a good one. Michigan playing at North Carolina. I think North Carolina wins. But Michigan State took it to North Carolina. Michigan State obviously a little different than Michigan. But Michigan's got some talent. If they pulled an upset, I think that would speak volumes for what's to come for Michigan. I think that'll be an interesting one to see how they play at North Carolina. Outside of Michigan, the next team alphabetically would be Michigan State. They're 5-1. Their only loss, like we mentioned, was to Duke. I can talk a while about that game. I mean, it's amazing how big Duke is and how Michigan State just looked like kind of another team against Duke. I still think Michigan State beats Duke in the national title game. I think that you're going to see the best Michigan State team, Tom Izzo-led team at the end of the year. going against a freshman-led Duke team. Grayson Allen went nuts against Michigan State. That's great. That's Grayson Allen going crazy from three. But Michigan State still played fairly poorly and lost by 7, and Grayson Allen went for like 37 points. So I think Michigan State, in general, nothing worrisome to be 5-1. Your only loss to Duke. And November 26th, you beat North Carolina by 18 points. You hold them to 45. I mean, I didn't see much of that game at all, unfortunately. But Michigan State beating North Carolina, holding them to 45 points on a neutral court, that's impressive because North Carolina is a good team. They're top 10 in the country for a reason. Michigan State holding North Carolina to 45, I saw clips of their defense, and it's like I think I retweeted a tweet of their defense, one defensive possession where they just absolutely locked down North Carolina, and they did the whole game, obviously. But Michigan State's defense against good teams, against UConn so far this year, Duke, again, Grayson Allen went nuts. But North Carolina, to hold them to 45, you don't see North Carolina scoring 45. They want to score in the 90s, and they do. I mean, North Carolina always gets close to averaging 90 points a game by the end of the year. So Michigan State defensively, they're going to be really good. I'm not worried about Michigan State at all. Did you take anything from that Duke game, Troy? Did that mean anything to you, losing to Duke? And since then, they crushed North Carolina and put a defensive stranglehold on them, holding them to 45 points. That's impressive to me.
What was that, buddy? I couldn't hear you. My phone was breaking up.
Michigan State. Did you take anything from that Michigan State Duke game? And then Michigan State held North Carolina to 45 points. That impressed the heck out of me.
Well, the one thing again here is early season matchup. You mentioned it, Tom Izzo, tournament time. There's no other coach that I'd rather have at that point. Tom Izzo is going to have that team ready, tournament ready. You even look at the team last year that Tom Izzo had with all those injuries. Look what he did at the end of the year. He gets his teams ready to play, and he knows what he's doing. He's been down that road a time or two. What I take from it is it's early in the season. It was a nice preview to see the guys on the team, but these two teams are going to be totally different 3 months from now. That's what I take from it. And Will the outcome be different? Probably, or it could be the same. They're both really good teams. We knew that 3 weeks ago, Kevin. These are really good teams, and they had a chance to play early in the season. But again, what is going to happen 30 games down the road, or 33 games down the road, however many it is, if they meet again? I mean, that's the thing you got to look at. This is a long season. I just mentioned a little bit ago. There's a reason teams play those cupcakes before the conference schedule, because if somebody gets hurt, it could derail your whole season. Your season could be done over in a heartbeat. And, health-wise, if these two teams stay healthy, who's going to compete with them? Okay, dabble a Kansas in there. Throw some of these other teams in there, maybe. But these two teams, they were as advertised in that early season matchup. And the thing is, they're only going to get better, especially the Duke team with the young guys. And it's funny you say, this Duke team that's so young, Michigan State is not so old themselves, Kevin.
Yeah.
They're a young team too, but here's the thing. They already played a year. So they may be young, but I guess I'll call them proven veterans. They've been there, done that. They struggled at times last year. And I just mentioned about Wisconsin having that 4 non-conference stretch that probably helped them out. Well, Michigan State, these guys had a whole season of adversity, dealing with the injuries, dealing with the media, dealing with the ups and downs, dealing with the Big Ten Conference. That team is already battle-tested. That's why I like Michigan State. They're not going to have to learn on the ropes like they did last year. And that Duke team, I know they got Coach K, but they're still young guys. They've got to learn on the ropes. They haven't been there. They haven't done that. They haven't went through the grind of an ACC conference schedule. You look at the conference schedule compared to the non-conference schedule, Kevin. And to me, it's a little bit different. Yeah, the games are there, but there's, so many days in between. For the most part, once you start getting into your conference schedule, you pretty much know, here it is. This is where we got to go. We got to go on the road. We're at home. It can be a grind, and that's what I'm waiting to see what happens with Duke, because they have to go through that grind.
Yeah, as a Duke fan, I don't think they go undefeated. I'm sure that narrative is out there. They're not going unbeaten. They're way too young to go through everyone in the ACC and not lose a game. They're impressive. I think they're the second best team in the country, but they're not going unbeaten. Michigan State also plays Notre Dame Thursday. If you're listening to this, watch Michigan State and Notre Dame. Notre Dame's the number 5 team in the country. I don't think Notre Dame is necessarily that good, but Notre Dame is very good and better than what people think Notre Dame basketball is. Bonzie Colson on the inside, he's unbelievable. And Farrell, the point guard, he's also great. I think Notre Dame's a very good team. So that Notre Dame.
Has Colson been at Notre Dame for like 10 years?
Yeah, I think so. I think he's
seriously.
pushing 10.
I mean, it seems like he's been at Notre Dame for 10 years. The guy's been a playmaker there for quite a while. He's a fun player to watch. I know that he probably over the last couple of years with the bigger names they've had at Notre Dame probably got overlooked a lot, but he's one of the guys that I always enjoyed watching. And if you did watch the tournament, I'm sure a lot of fans listening, and maybe not Notre Dame fans, so you probably didn't watch a lot of Notre Dame basketball. But when you watch Notre Dame basketball, it's funny. This is that guy that's like that understudy, the guy that is, I don't even want to say underappreciated. I think they appreciated him, but he was just overlooked and overshadowed by all the other talent that was on the court. But think about Notre Dame, Kevin. I don't know how much you watched of them, but even in the tournament, who did they turn to? They turned to him. They needed a player. They needed some good, hard-nosed defense or a rebound or a hustle play. That's the guy that did it right there. I've enjoyed watching this guy, and I joke that it seems like 10 years, but it does. It seems like he's been there every year. It's like you're naming him, and it's like, what'd you do, just go back like Groundhog Day and continue to play again or what? But the guy plays hard-nosed basketball, and you know, Kevin, I like those players. I like those guys that play fundamental basketball, that are hard-nosed, want to get dirty. They're okay sliding on the court and getting a big old court burn up and down their leg and having to go to the court and the blood's running down the knee from doing it. I like those guys, and I like him a lot.
Yeah, he's fun to watch. He's averaging 20 and 10 this year, almost 2 steals a game, over 2 blocks a game, 59% from the field. He's awesome. I mean, if he won Player of the Year, Notre Dame finishes top 10 in the country, that wouldn't surprise me at all. I think Miles Bridges will be up there, but there's a lot of talent on Michigan State. Not to say that there's not on Notre Dame, but Colson's the leader. Matt Farrell, the point guard, also a senior, along with Colson. Those two are dynamite. I like Notre Dame the last couple of years. This year I like them again. They're not as great 1 through 5 or 6 like they have been in past years, but Farrell's a senior as a point guard. Colson's a senior as a big. Those two are dominant players in college basketball. TJ Gibbs, a sophomore, also averages 15. Notre Dame, Michigan State, Thursday night. Again, if you can, watch it. That's going to be a good one. To move on from Michigan State, got about, I guess, almost half the Big Ten left here. Minnesota, I'm pulling up their schedule. They are 7-0. They have not lost. They play number 10 Miami in the ACC Big Ten Challenge. That's also tonight, Wednesday, November 29th. As we're recording this, and Minnesota's played no one outside of, well, I shouldn't say that. They played at Providence. They won by 12. That's a solid win. Providence is always solid. They also beat Alabama, who's number 25 in the country, which we're not talking about football. We're talking about basketball. Alabama's ranked. They've gotten some big recruits over the last 2 years, especially this past offseason. Bama's a fine team. Minnesota beating them, scoring 89 points. That's impressive. They've also scored over 100 2 times, over 90 2 other times. Minnesota's a really good basketball team. And the game against number 10 Miami, that'll be a good one. I really hope Minnesota wins that one. I love this Minnesota team, and they're 7-0. And if they beat Miami, you're talking about Rutgers and Nebraska in that little Big Ten stretch before you go at Arkansas. That'll be a tough game. Arkansas is a good team, but this team, if they're unbeaten going into January, honestly wouldn't shock me. I almost expect them to beat Miami. I think Minnesota is a really good basketball team. They're number 12 in the country for a reason. After Minnesota, looks like we've got Nebraska, and Nebraska is 5-2. You may be thinking, again, 5-2, that's pretty good. Well, they've lost to St. John's by 23. They lost to UCF by 9. Those aren't great teams. And their best win has come against probably Long Beach State. So Nebraska has not played anyone. They're 5-2, but they play Michigan State December 3rd, Minnesota December 5th, Creighton December 9th, who's a top 25 team, and then they play Kansas December 16th. I expect 4 straight losses right there, to be honest. So we'll see really what Nebraska is made of soon. After Nebraska, we've got Northwestern, who, like I said, kind of been a little disappointed at this point. They're 4-3. They lost to Creighton, which, again, top 25 team. But they lost to Texas Tech by 36 points. And that's something that caught my eye when I saw that final score. Northwestern losing to Texas Tech by 36. I think Northwestern's a better team. But if you lose by 36 points, that's kind of alarming. I expected Northwestern to be very solid. They're a veteran team, so that loss surprises me. Like I said, they're 4-3. They lost at Georgia Tech a night ago, 52-51, scoring 51 points against Georgia Tech. A little suspect, in my opinion. So Northwestern kind of, especially that Texas Tech game, 85-49. I wouldn't have expected Northwestern to lose to Michigan State, 85-49, let alone Texas Tech. It's early in the year, so take what you want from it. It's just something to keep in mind, in my opinion. I don't know if you've got anything on that, Troy, before I move on.
No, not really. It's, again, Northwestern early in the season. But, yeah, you get blown out, it makes you question a few things about your team. But I think Northwestern, they'll turn it around. They've got some experience. They're coming off that NCAA bid last year. I think, you look at it, maybe they were just overwhelmed at that point. So I have nothing else to add there.
Ohio State started 4-0 against Cupcakes. They lost to Gonzaga by 27, understandably so. Gonzaga's not as good as they were a year ago, but they're still probably a 4 seed, 5 seed. Gonzaga's still a good team. This year, they rebounded with a win over Stanford, which is not terrible, and then they just lost to Butler in overtime. So Ohio State's 5-2. If they could have beaten Butler, I think that would have been impressive. But they took them to overtime. Nothing to bash them for there. But we'll see, what Ohio State is made of. December 23rd, they play North Carolina. Then they have Miami of Ohio before getting into Big Ten play. But we'll see what happens with Ohio State if they care. First-year head coach from Butler. If they care, they've got the talent to make a little noise. But I'm expecting Ohio State. I'm not expecting this team to do a ton of damage just because of kind of how they played a year ago. They just did not play inspired basketball, in my opinion. Penn State, they are 6-1. They have beaten 6 Cupcakes, basically. So that's our beloved Big Ten team this year. Both Troy and I like Penn State. They're 6-1. That's cool. They beat Pitt by 31. That's interesting to me. But they also lost to Texas A&M by 11. That's their only loss. Outside of that, bunch of Cupcakes. They play NC State at NC State also tonight. Big Ten ACC Challenge. So that'll be an interesting one on the road against a decent NC State team. If they win that, that's interesting. Penn State again plays Wisconsin December 4th, Iowa December 2nd. It'll be just every game to me is interesting with Penn State because I think that's a team that is a fringe NCAA tournament team, and then starting 6-1 does not hurt. I guess I'll leave it at that. Purdue only got 3 left here. Purdue's 6-2. Lost to Tennessee in overtime, lost to Western Kentucky by 4, which is interesting. But Purdue rebounded from those 2 losses with a 25-point win over Arizona and then a 9-point win over Louisville. So 2 impressive games from Purdue as of yesterday. Losing in overtime to Tennessee, that's not a bad loss. And then the Western Kentucky game, kind of suspect, but to beat Zona by 25 points, that shows what Purdue can be. They also beat Marquette by 15 earlier in the year. So Purdue's done some good things. They've had a blip here and there. But Purdue's going to be a top half Big Ten team for sure. Both Troy and I like Purdue as well. They're kind of like Minnesota to me. Both those teams are going to be very good in my opinion. Maybe not unbelievable, but regardless, Purdue's going to be a good one. Rutgers is the second to last team here. 6-1. They started 6-0, lost to Florida State by 5, played a bunch of cupcakes, started 6-0. That's Rutgers for you. Not much else to say. I mean, they play Minnesota and Michigan State in this little 2-game Big Ten stretch. So I expect a couple losses there. If they pull an upset, Troy and I will certainly be talking about that next week. But Rutgers, to this point, you can't take a ton from what they've done. And Wisconsin is the last team, and we have gone through their schedule as well. So I have nothing more on college basketball talk. I am going to leave you listeners with this, basically, that it's early in the college basketball season, ACC Big Ten tournament stuff, not tournament, challenge stuff, I should say, going on as we're recording this. So some good games to be played early December. You're getting some Big Ten, a taste of the Big Ten schedule, as I have, I guess, like to put it during this show. But Troy and I, finally, after an hour and a half or so, will get back to you next week with probably what will be an all Big Ten basketball show. Go big or go home. We'll have an independent football show and an independent basketball show, most likely for you guys next week. Follow the show on Twitter at Youngster Old Man, all one word, spelled how it is, Youngster Old Man. Follow me, again, if you want to just see a flaming car. Follow me on Twitter at Cade Cunny. Follow Troy at TroyRobert967. We will catch you guys next week. Head over to thegruelingtruth.net if you want any more of our archive stuff. Otherwise, follow us on Twitter, and we always tweet out live links of our stuff, of our past shows. We will catch you guys next week. It's been a great combo show with you, Troy, but we will let the listeners go finally after talking about a bunch of football and a bunch of basketball. Until next week, see you guys later.